Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. I'm Frater Eleftheria. Tonight I'm going to talk about something which has come up in my personal life, something which I touched upon in my last video, but didn't go into too much detail. I feel I'm ready to reveal what that is with you now, if you've followed this channel for a while, and as you've grown more familiar with me, it's something that is important for you to know about my story. And it's also something which, by me talking about it, I can potentially help a lot of people. Certain types of people who might find life challenging because they face the same thing that I've recently discovered that I face. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. So in my last video, I spoke about how through one of the spiritual tests or spiritual trials that I'd been taking on, I faced a very difficult situation. Or, to be more exact, I was already facing a difficult situation, and I gained insight into why I was facing it, and some of the repetitions of karma, of cause and effect throughout my life that were giving rise to this again, and figuring out how to break that cycle. So, and in the process I discovered something huge about myself. So the particular test or trial was revolving around not feeling appreciated, feeling like people were judging me, feeling like other people just didn't understand me, and feeling like I was constantly being disapproved of. This is a big thing that has recurred throughout my life, and it was something that I had to face and overcome the root cause of that as a part of this test, as a part of this trial. This particular kind of context in which this arose, the reason why I started to undergo this spiritual process of getting to the bottom of these feelings in my life, was because of a situation which had arisen largely at work over the preceding months, where I just had difficulty with people, difficulty with certain tasks involving people and interacting with people, and other people seeing where I'm coming from and vice versa. Things which I didn't really have to deal with too much in most of my previous jobs. And I needed to get to the bottom of why. I realized that a lot of karmic patterns were repeating themselves again as a result of these difficulties. And I started to explore what it could be. I went through a lot of introspection. You remember from my previous video, which I'll link in the description below, that it was such a great test. The level of psychological hurt and history that I had to face and transform was so great, so overwhelming, that the Christ actually spoke to me and offered to help me carry that burden, because it was too much to do alone. Well, after that state of prayer where I had that experience, I went home, and that night I found 2 videos popping up on my suggested videos on YouTube. And what these videos showed me seemed to answer all the questions that I had about why certain things, specific things to me, felt like they were always so difficult for me. And what these videos pointed to were signs that a person had autism. And this seemed like quite a far-fetched thing to consider about myself. I always thought that I was neurotypical for all intents and purposes. But the difficulties that I was having with people had become so great that they were actually affecting my ability to do my job. So I had to be open to the idea that there was something greater behind this. So I started to consider, am I on the autism spectrum? I have a friend who has autism who I messaged and I said, I'm going through this process of questioning, is there anything that you can help me with or give me to help understand if this is really what's going on with me? And he sent me a self-assessment test known as the RADS-R, which used to be used in clinical assessments, which I took and I scored quite highly, which would indicate that I was indeed on the spectrum. Eventually, after a bit of prevaricating and not being sure if it was the right thing to do, I decided to go to a psychologist and be formally tested. And then, if I was indeed on the autism spectrum, be given a diagnosis. And the result was exactly the same as the RADS-R. So I was given a formal diagnosis about 2 weeks ago now of being on the autism spectrum. So that is the big thing that I recently learnt about myself. And it has helped me to understand a lot of things that have happened throughout my life, hardships that I've faced that I didn't understand before. I didn't understand the reason, and now I do. And as painful as it has been to realise how much I suffered in ways that other people simply don't have to suffer, and processing all of that has been very intense. It's a relief to know what's behind this, and now I can give myself the tools to try and manage and try and adapt and really understand myself more fully and really break some of those patterns that kept causing me problems in my life, and maybe, just maybe, helping other people to understand me a bit better when I've spent my entire life feeling completely misunderstood by other people. And I wasn't sure if I even wanted to do this video because it's deviating slightly from my usual spiritual content, although that's not entirely true because it is linked to the work on oneself, and it is linked to shadow work, and it is linked to the work of obtaining self-knowledge. But I decided to speak about it for a few reasons. One is to do with removing the stigma that is associated with autism. Although we have come a long way in the last 20 years in terms of understanding neurodivergence or neurodiversity or whatever you want to call it, I'm probably not what a lot of people have in their heads when they think of someone with autism. They probably have, a really extreme case in their head. But that's not what everyone with autism looks like. And in a lot of cases, it's just something that's a little bit different about that person. Maybe such a small difference that it's hard to even pinpoint what's odd about that person. And that's the sort of category that I fall into. My autism sort of passed under the radar for decades as just, that guy who's a little bit quirky and a little bit weird, and, he's very smart, but he's just got a few weird, awkward personality traits. But that is what autism can look like a lot of the time. And also sharing my own story might help people who are grappling with their own neurodiversity or potential neurodiversity. I did decide to get a diagnosis. I understand why some people wouldn't want to take that step, because it's pigeonholing you, it's attaching a label to you that society can then use to make you lesser than and other you, I understand all that, and I considered all of that through my own thought process, and I eventually decided, well, people are going to do that to me anyway, just because I act a bit different in social situations. So I might as well be able to formally point to the reason to help some certain people understand a little bit better and maybe not be so judgmental. And that's better than just not knowing, or people not knowing and judging me and categorizing me anyway. So what exactly is autism? Well, it's the best way that I would describe it from a insider's perspective is it's like having a brain that runs on a different operating system. There's certain things which an autistic brain can do better, but there's other things that the autistic brain is not so good at compared to other people, like having social awareness, understanding social cues, or implied communication, and having difficulty communicating with people in certain ways. And autism is something that looks different for every person as well. There's a lot of labels and there's a lot of terms that don't get used anymore. For example, the distinction between high functioning and low functioning autism. I would be in the high functioning category because I've got a high IQ, and I've done pretty well for myself in life, as opposed to someone who maybe has intellectual challenges as well as not being able to navigate social situations. These days, high functioning and low functioning isn't really used because it can kind of, it's a bit of a judgment about people, as though if you are intelligent and have autism, you don't have challenges. And as though if you don't have a high IQ and you have autism, then there's not other valuable things that you can contribute. So that doesn't really get used anymore, but that's the label that might have been applied to me once. Pre-2013, there was a distinction between autism and Asperger's. I would probably be considered to be someone with Asperger's if I was given a pre-2013 diagnosis. It was quite eye-opening to have the realization that I'm actually on the autism spectrum. I've felt different my entire life. Part of that is to do with being, having the magical side to my life and all of that. But I just was never like other people. I never felt like I fit anywhere in society or with any social groups. I was always the outlier. I was always the odd one out. I often felt like not even really human, like an extraterrestrial who was trying desperately to blend in to human society. And that has been very alienating. And there have been certain people who have accepted me over the years, usually groups of misfits. But I have felt very ostracized a lot of the time by most of the people that I've encountered. I felt like if I let the mask slip too much and people see too much of the real me, it'll just freak them out. It'll be too different and they won't be able to handle it. And they might even be a bit intimidated by the way that my brain works. And make assumptions about how easy my life must be, and even get a bit jealous of me, not seeing the invisible struggles that I had to go through every day, which I'm only just becoming aware I was even doing, and going through, and just, because, you have these experiences through life and you think, oh, it's just because I'm a young person or a teenager. That's why I feel like everything is constantly against me. But it was actually, those things all played a factor, but there was this other thing behind it as well. This incompatibility between the way that my brain works and the way that society has been built. Yeah, and a lot of my friendships, almost all of my friendships and relationships over the years have come to an end. Either they've fizzled out because of a lack of maintenance of the relationship, or, you know, people have turned against me for some reason based on some misunderstanding in terms of how we communicated. You know, I can come across like I don't really care about other people. You know, my communication style is often mistaken for coldness or indifference to other people, or self-centeredness, self-absorption, seeming like I don't care about the other person. And that's caused me a lot of problems over the years, which I'm now only starting to realize were caused because of me being on the autism spectrum. And as a result of finding out that I'm on the autism spectrum, I also finally got to the bottom of why I've always seemed to feel unheard by people, or unappreciated, or not taken seriously, or like people don't place value in the things that I say. It's not anything that I'm doing wrong per se. It's not anything that's like a deficiency in me, or, you know, what I'm doing with my life or who I am as a person. It's an inability for me to get my point across effectively in certain situations, and people not grasping the importance of what I'm saying because they don't really understand where I'm coming from. And it's that misunderstanding that leads to the lack of appreciation, or the lack of understanding, let's say. And so that was a big thing that I was able to let go of as a result of understanding this about myself. But, you know, it's also been very painful to, like I said, go over my life again, blow by blow, and realize, oh, that relationship ended because of the autism. That friendship ended because of the autism. That person lashed out at me unfairly because of the autism. And just revisiting all of that pain and all of that hurt from the past that I was trying my best to leave behind me. And, you know, going through all that was a challenge. I've come out of the other end now. I guess one thing that I've really had to do is take my ability to forgive people to a whole new level. Like, I knew that you know, because I'm trying to let go of all my karma, that I would have to forgive every single person who has hurt me as a result of me having autism, and the clashes that creates when people don't understand me. And it was a lot of work, because, you know, I really do feel like I was treated unfairly in those situations. I mean, people weren't to know, obviously. How can someone know something about you if you don't tell them, let alone know yourself? So I understand that part of it, but it was still unfair for me to go through those experiences. And if people had, you know, understood, then I wouldn't have to have gone through them, perhaps. Although that's no guarantee when it comes to people. But just having to let go of all of that hurt and all of that unfair treatment, you know, it was actually really hard for me to do at first. My view of humanity really took a hit. I was really disappointed in people, and just the way that they feel the need to attack anyone who's slightly different. You know, not even in a bad way, just someone who's a little bit different. That's enough for people to feel that they can't allow that person to just exist. That's what I've learned about the majority of the human race as a result of this, reflecting on my life, reflecting on this, what it's brought out in other people. And I needed to somehow find it in my heart to forgive all of those people. And it was hard to do for a long time. And then I kind of had this realization that As I seek to become a spiritual leader in my life, through this channel and eventually through other means, I will be asking people who listen to me to undertake even greater acts of forgiveness than what is being asked of me in this situation. So how can I ask that of others if I can't forgive the people in my life who have hurt me as a result of me being on the autism spectrum? At first, I could only do it out of a sense of duty or obligation, but that was enough. And then the rest kind of followed after that. You know, the emotional development catching up with that kind of started to follow on after that. But that was an important step for me to forgive all of those people. Another important spiritual lesson that I had to learn was to do with pride. I really had to swallow my pride when I was going to get my diagnosis. You know, because it's called autism spectrum disorder. And I think that, like the term high functioning, the term autism spectrum disorder will one day become outdated and be seen as insensitive. Because I don't really think it is a disorder. I mean, there are things, don't get me wrong, there are things about it that make life harder. But that's not all that it is. There's things that certain people with autism have that are different about their brains. They could almost be seen as an advantage. So, you know, and there's give and take there. It's not purely one or the other, but it's certainly not a disorder. I think it's too reductive to call it that. And particularly from the point of view of someone like me on the autism spectrum, who also has the high intelligence, from my point of view, the rest of the world is disordered. My mind is perfectly ordered, and relative to the way that my consciousness is ordered, it's everything else that is disordered and needs to be put in order. So for that world, that disordered world that falls short of all my expectations, for that world to label me as disordered just seemed like the ultimate irony and the ultimate insult. And that's something that I had to kind of overcome. I had to swallow my pride, and I had to just receive the diagnosis. It's just a label, but in the long run, it'll help me immensely to have that formal diagnosis. So that was a real test as well, of letting go of that pride. But one thing I just started to touch on then is autism's funny because it's not something that is completely disadvantaging, but it's not something that is completely advantaging either. So, you know, there are certain people, not all people, but certain people who have autism have very great strengths in terms of the things that they can do with their mind. And there have been some people who have called autism a superpower. I think that that's a bit elitist, and I think that it's a bit self-deluding because, you know, if you have trouble responding to an email quickly and easily and in a timely manner, it's not, you know, that disqualifies you from having a superpower. That's something that most people don't struggle with at all. But there are certain things, in my experience of having autism, that are actually really good, that I'm really grateful for, in a funny kind of a way. Which, you know, it seems like an odd thing to say for something that's labelled a disorder. But there are many advantages I feel that I have because of the way my brain is wired. So some of the things that I really like about the way that my mind works is my ability to see patterns, see connections between different concepts and different things that other people can't see. In a similar vein, seeing little details in things that other people don't notice. And these two things put together help me to see topics in a creative, original way and have unique insights into different subject matters that other people haven't had. I'm really good at focusing my attention on one thing with laser-like precision for a very long period of time. And I'm very good at memorizing information and storing information in my brain and being able to call upon it when I need it. So I've got very strong general knowledge and a very strong knowledge base in my special interests, chief of which is religion and spirituality, clearly from this channel. It means that I'm good at solving complex problems, and I like finding puzzles and solving them and finding an answer to things that other people can't figure out. I'm very systematic in my thinking, and I like to systematize things. So I have a very strong drive to bring order to my environment and bring order to the chaos, which is something, that the world badly needs, particularly with the way that our culture is going at the moment. In a similar vein to that, I have a very strong sense of justice, of what is right and what is wrong. And once I have established my value system, and once I'm convinced that something is the right thing to do, it's almost impossible to make me deviate from that. And I will uphold those principles of what I think is right very strictly. And this is something which was understood in classical times as being virtuous. In, modern psychology, it's pathologized as cognitive rigidity. But I see it as a good thing, provided you have the right values and your values aren't, attacking a certain group of people or whatever it is. Something about me that is both a strength and a weakness is my honesty and sincerity. I am a very sincere person, very honest, very upfront. I'm very trusting. That is to say, I like to see the good in other people and give people a fair chance when I know them. And, I don't mince words when I'm describing something. I don't try and hide little things. I don't try and deceive people or finesse what I'm saying or manipulate what I'm saying or anything like that, anything that could be duplicitous or deceptive. It just doesn't come naturally to me, and I don't see the point in it. So, being honest and having integrity comes naturally to me. It can be mistaken by some people as me being naive, and that can lead them to try and take advantage of me, particularly narcissists who tend to be attracted to people who present like me because they see it as an opportunity to try and exploit someone. So I'm really put off by people being fake, or speaking idly or things like that. I value deep and meaningful conversation. I don't like small talk, and I don't like people putting on an act, which is ironic because I'm constantly masking because I'm trying to desperately appear normal to other people. So I'm constantly thinking about, what are my arms doing? What's my face doing? Does this seem normal, or is this going to make people freak out or think that there's something off-putting about me? But I don't try and deceive people, and because I was trusting of people and because I have been manipulated a few times, I decided as a result of the humiliation of that experience and the pain that I went through from that experience, I decided that I wouldn't go through it again. So like autistic people often do, I got really focused on learning as much as I could and understanding as much as I could about a new topic, which was understanding human behavior. And now I feel like I maybe have a more developed discernment than other people. Out of necessity, I had to develop that as a survival mechanism. So I noticed little subtle things about people behind the words that they speak, behind superficial appearances they put on, which tell me what the person is really up to, what sort of a person this really is. So, that I consider to be an advantage, because it alerts me early on to who the people are that I need to watch out for. Another thing that is both a strength and a weakness for me is my ability to see possibilities in the future of a particular event or sequence of events. So most people, when they're thinking about what they want to do in the future, how they want to respond to a certain event, they think, oh, well, everyone expects me to go from A to B, so I'm just going to go from A to B. But I think about, but this could happen, or this could happen, or this could happen, and this could happen. So how do we prepare for all of those scenarios? What is the best path, taking account of all the possibilities? And that often leads me to take a different path to other people, or it often leads me to take a different approach to a task than other people, and they think that because I don't do it the way that everybody else does it, it must be wrong, or I must be, insubordinate in some way, not respecting the hierarchy, whatever the social hierarchy is, not doing what I'm told. We live in a society full of people who love to be very compliant, most of them. So doing things differently all the time because I think so differently can be triggering to a lot of people, unfortunately, even though my way might actually be a better way in certain situations. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes by not thinking about the most obvious thing to do, which is the most obvious thing for a reason, I'm just giving myself decision paralysis, and that is not a good thing. And as I've learned what it means to have autism, I've also been thinking about what the repercussions of this are for my spiritual life, besides just the work on oneself. One of the things that I noticed almost straight away when I was going through the more positive traits of someone who has autism is that many of these things are actually a help rather than a hindrance when it comes to choosing to live a devout religious life or simply a spiritual life. A rigid adherence to what is right and wrong, seeing all of the different connections between things, being able to hyper-focus is very good for meditation, very good for, studying religious texts, as is, seeing details that other people don't see, and being able to memorize large amounts of information and draw upon that store of information and rearrange it in creative ways and see facets to it that other people can't see. Very good for a life of religious study, of studying holy scriptures. Being a lover of order and wanting to, desiring order is something that is very good. Well, not for all spiritual paths, but certainly, many of the major religions share that sentiment. And valuing truth and sincerity and honesty is also very compatible and very necessary for the spiritual path. I have looked for other people's takes from a spiritual perspective on autism. I've noticed that there seem to be a fair few people who practice some kind of magic who are on the spectrum as well. I've seen people linking autistic traits to, the way that shamans were identified in ancient cultures. That's a can of worms I don't really want to open. I don't know if I would take things that far, but it's an interesting theory. I've seen this sort of new age stuff about people with autism and ADHD are really just indigo children and they're special and all of that. And I mean, the two aren't mutually exclusive, but I don't think that repackaging something which does come with a lot of challenges and can cause friction with other people as just being special and, too good for this world is particularly helpful. I also decided to see if there was a Christian, like a mainstream Christian take on autism, and well, how useful do you think that was? About as useful as you might guess. And as you can imagine from mainstream Christians, they approached a very complex and sensitive issue that requires very sophisticated and nuanced thinking in precisely the way that it deserves, without being ignorant or bigoted at all. That's sarcasm, something which I sometimes have difficulty understanding. But no, the Christian takes on this were pretty terrible for the most part. Some of them said that autism is demonic possession. Some of them said that their church or whatever, Jesus or whatever, could cure autism, cured the autism of their children, because autism is a disease that needs to be stamped out. Like having, being attracted to certain people, I suppose. So that was the Christians' take, for the most part. No wisdom in that whatsoever. I think the secular world has got more wisdom in it than that. But there were some individual Christians who had some very interesting takes of their own, who actually had autism themselves, so knew a little bit about what they were talking about. And, they tried to see it in terms of, God makes everybody a certain way for a purpose. And perhaps autistic people are made this way to see things about God's plan and God's creation that other people can't necessarily see. There's some Kabbalistic takes on the soul of a person with autism, which I'm still trying to get my head around. I'm still trying to get my head around just generally the spiritual side to this whole autism thing that I've discovered about myself. We've barely even scratched the surface understanding neurodiversity itself, let alone its interaction with spirituality and religion and the various religious traditions that have emerged over the years. But, I certainly don't think that it has to be a negative thing. I think that, again, everyone's different, and it's a spectrum. I know that's a cliche, but it's impossible to make definitive statements that it will apply to everyone with autism, but certainly people in my situation. You can adjust and adapt, and just because things are harder for us when it comes to social situations or forms of communication, it doesn't mean it's impossible for us to learn. We're very good at learning things. It just takes longer to do. And, and we can make the things that could be perceived as advantageous about having autism, we can make those work for us. There's a lot of famous people throughout history who have been on the autism spectrum, or most likely have been. Albert Einstein was most likely on the autism spectrum. Isaac Newton was most likely on the autism spectrum. Elon Musk has come out as, having Asperger's and talking about his experience of that. And these people were all movers and shakers. They were able to find the freedom to pursue their special interest unfettered. And in doing so, were able to revolutionize the area that they were so obsessed with, that they were so passionate about, and bring a high level of competence to that area. And, my special interest is spirituality and religion. So what does it mean for somebody with autism to have a special interest in religion and to be able to delve as deeply as they can into religion? What sort of things might I be able to bring into the world if I can do that? So those are things that I need to think about. And some of the purpose that there might be, that I might be able to attribute to having this neurological condition. But yeah, dealing with finding out that I'm on the autism spectrum has definitely been challenging. It's not been easy for me, but greatly rewarding to finally get some real answers to some real hard problems of my life, and some cycles that have been going for over 30 years that I can finally start to try and break. And it can only get better from here now that I'm armed with this knowledge. And so, if you feel that you may be neurodiverse, it's absolutely worth discovering that about yourself, I believe. Forget about what other people think. It doesn't matter what other people think. And, whatever label is attached to you, if they want to judge you or condemn you for who you are, they're going to do that anyway. But you can have more self-knowledge, and you can grow as a person with that knowledge. So if that's something that you want to explore yourself, I would say don't be afraid. Do it. You won't regret it. In fact, it would be one of the most important decisions that you make in your life. And don't fear the stigma. There's more and more people who are coming out and being open about their neurodiversity. It's becoming more and more accepted. Not everyone is going to understand, but some people will. And eventually there will be a cultural shift. And instead of seeing certain things as a disorder, we will learn how to really access the value that people can add by having a brain that works in a unique way. And we'll understand, how that can interact with the human spiritual experience as well. And that's something that I'm going to discover about myself as I explore the spiritual path with this newfound knowledge about myself. So that's what's been happening with me at the moment, and those are my thoughts on the autism spectrum and finding out that I'm on that spectrum. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. You can subscribe to me on Odyssey as well. And if you want to give me extra support, help me to get to self-employment faster, which is the ideal employment situation for people on the spectrum, then please join as a member. And you can also give me a super thanks by hitting that thanks button down below. But thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time.